What is up, everybody? I'm your Legendary Commander, and welcome back to another Advanced Space Engineers tutorial on Scrap. In this tutorial, we're going to show you how to save your survival kit. When I say your survival kit, it's actually more or less your entire respawn pod, and that's because when you're using Scrap, what happens when you grind something down? You lose material, and you can't rebuild those parts, especially if you lose your survival kit, and that's the only piece of equipment you have. So we're wanting to save that, keep power running to it so we can keep respawning, and at the same time, maybe even keep building, although you should be out of that pod by then for the building aspect, but you still want to respawn, and you don't have any silver, so you can't just build new parts. Now, there are multiple ways to do this. You could use a connector and then use a piston or something like that to get this all to line up, but we're going to do it the cheapest way possible, and that's the way I prefer to do it here. It can be a little more of a headache, but trust me, it's a good idea. The first thing you need to do is figure out where you're going to be wanting your respawn pod. That way you can put your rotor base on your large grid in a horizontal likely position to where you're going to have your respawn pod. Next, you're going to go ahead and disable your landing gears, if not cut them off completely. I ended up cutting all mine off eventually to get them down the slope that I was actually going to push my respawn pod down, which is the next thing. You probably want to go down a hill with this, so your base is probably in a hole. Make sure that you build a slope, but a gentle slope, but not too gentle, that you can push the respawn pod and hopefully get it rolling down the slope. This is probably the biggest struggle, is getting this pod to move. So what you can do to help get your pod to move is, if you have build vision, you can actually turn your thrusters on and off. So if you're already using Scrap as a mod, you might as well grab build vision as well. It's really going to help out. Really easy. You look at the object that you're trying to control, hit control middle mouse wheel, and it allows instant access to the inventory, not the inventory, but the control panel. Right from there, you can control that one thruster. Because of the quick access, it can make it really easy to flip the pod, get it rolling again, and or allowing you to push it easier because it makes the pod lighter. Either way, it's going to still help. Once you get it down there, the next thing you're going to want to do is place a small rotor head on your respawn pod. Place it appropriately to where you're going to plug into the center of that large grid rotor. Also, make sure you don't push the respawn pod too close that you can't get that rotor head mounted onto your respawn pod. That could be a bit of an issue otherwise. If your respawn pod won't move, you may need to slap a piston on somewhere on your respawn pod. This can cause your vehicle to jolt as you raise the piston up and down, especially once it hits the ground, and also reduces the amount of friction it's making. This is actually how I got mine in position. It also helped me lift the respawn pod at the proper angle to plug into the rotor, which is the next thing. Once the back of the rotor head is touching and inside the rotor, you can go into the control panel or use the build vision and find the attach button on your rotor. This will attach and the vehicle may jolt a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't explode. As long as it doesn't, you're in great shape. You might want to save before you do this. Once you are attached, the rotor will start transferring power from either the respawn pod to the main base, or vice versa. If you have incoming power, you can now power up your respawn pod. If you do have incoming power, I'd highly suggest taking your respawn pod and turning it to a recharge mode. That way you always have a backup battery in case the entire system, your entire network, needs a jolt of power and you have no income on power for some reason, like an assert drone shooting up your wind turbines. So aside from time, you'll see I didn't really accrue too much of a cost. I didn't weld up the rotor or the rotor head, and the only thing I ended up welding was a piston without even welding its head. So essentially I spent maybe 1-2 steel plates on the rotor assembly itself, and you might have to spend the resources on a piston if you can't get the thrusters and the pod to maneuver in proper position. Now you may have also noticed the hinge. Don't worry about the hinge. The hinge was actually set up so I could swing the respawn pod into a different position without having to physically push it. So that is going to be it for this one. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Make sure to tell your friends. But y'all take care. And I will catch you next time. Bye bye.